My father, Senator Richard Beaumont, a man whose name commanded respect and fear across Veridian Heights, looked at me on my wedding day not with pride, but with pure, unadulterated disgust. "Your marriage is a disgrace, Amelia," he hissed, his words cutting deeper than any knife. "A Beaumont marrying him? A commoner? You will regret this. You will beg for my forgiveness." He thought he had broken me. He thought he had won. But what he didn't know, what none of them could ever suspect, was that this disgraceful wedding was merely the fuse. The real devastation, that was for him. And when the truth finally exploded, they didn't just panic. They tried to stop me. They tried to silence us. But it was too late. Their perfect world was about to shatter, and the man they thought was beneath them, he was the architect of their downfall. The grand ballroom of the Beaumont estate shimmered under the chandeliers, a stark contrast to the icy tension that permeated the air. Amelia, resplendent in her ivory gown, felt the weight of her father's gaze, a palpable disapproval that overshadowed the joyous occasion. Her marriage to Liam, a man of humble origins, initially introduced to her father as just an accountant, was, in Senator Beaumont's eyes, a profound disgrace. "You have shamed this family, Amelia," Richard had growled just hours before, his voice a low, venomous threat that still echoed in her mind. "A Beaumont marrying a commoner? Unthinkable. You will regret this. You will come crawling back." Amelia, however, saw only love and unwavering support in Liam's eyes, a sanctuary from the suffocating expectations of her aristocratic lineage. She had defied her father, not out of childish rebellion, but out of a deep, unshakable conviction that love transcended social standing. The reception was a carefully orchestrated facade of civility. Senator Richard Beaumont, a titan of industry and a powerful political figure whose influence stretched across the city of Veridian Heights, moved through the crowd with a forced smile, his eyes darting, assessing, judging. He made a point of introducing Liam to his peers with a dismissive wave, often adding, "Amelia's husband, Liam. He's an accountant." The emphasis on accountant was always delivered with a subtle sneer, designed to diminish Liam in front of the city's elite. His wife, Eleanor, a woman whose beauty had long since hardened into a mask of perpetual disappointment, offered Amelia a tight, almost pitying smile. "You've made your bed, dear," she'd whispered, her words laced with a subtle cruelty that suggested Amelia had sealed her own pathetic fate. Amelia knew the whispers, the snide remarks, the thinly veiled contempt that followed her every move. She was the black sheep, the daughter who had dared to choose her own path, rejecting the carefully laid plans for a strategic alliance with another powerful family. But what they didn't know, what none of them could possibly fathom, was the intricate web of secrets that lay beneath the polished surface of the Beaumont empire. Secrets that Amelia, with Liam's quiet strength beside her, was about to unravel. The air crackled with unspoken resentments, a powder keg waiting for a single spark. The wedding cake, a towering confection of white and gold, seemed to mock the fragile peace. As Amelia and Liam prepared for their first dance, a sense of foreboding settled over her. This wasn't just a wedding, it was the prelude to a storm, a reckoning that would shatter the Beaumont legacy and expose the rot within. Her father's words, "a disgrace," would soon be dwarfed by the true disgrace he had meticulously hidden. The dance floor, usually a place of celebration, felt like an arena where a silent battle was about to commence, a battle for truth, for justice, and for the very soul of her family. The tension was so thick, you could almost taste it, a bitter tang in the otherwise sweet air of celebration. Each smile, each toast, each forced pleasantry was a layer of deceit, soon to be peeled back. The classical waltz, meant to evoke romance, instead played a somber tune in Amelia's mind, a premonition of the dramatic events poised to unfold. She tightened her grip on Liam's hand, drawing strength from his steady presence, knowing that their shared purpose was far greater than any societal expectation or familial scorn. The weight of the truth they carried was immense, a burden that had silently grown with each passing day, now ready to burst forth and consume everything in its path. The opulent surroundings, the glittering jewels, the expensive attire of the guests all would soon be rendered meaningless in the face of the raw, brutal reality they were about to expose. Amelia took a deep breath, steeling herself for the inevitable confrontation, for the moment when the mask of civility would finally drop, revealing the monstrous truth beneath. Liam, ever observant, noticed the subtle shifts in Amelia's demeanor. He knew the pressure she was under, the constant barrage of her family's disapproval. His hand found hers, a reassuring squeeze that spoke volumes. "Are you all right, my love?" he murmured, his voice a steady anchor in the turbulent sea of her emotions. Amelia offered a weak smile. "As all right as I can be, surrounded by sharks and designer suits," she had confided in Liam about her suspicions, the nagging feeling that something was deeply wrong within her family's business dealings. For months, she had been piecing together fragments of conversations, discrepancies in financial reports she'd stumbled upon, and the sudden, unexplained disappearance of certain employees. Her father's ruthlessness was legendary, but Amelia always believed it was confined to the cutthroat world of business, not extending to outright criminality. Yet, the evidence she'd painstakingly gathered, with Liam's help, painted a far darker picture. It began with an old ledger, hidden in her grandfather's study, detailing illicit transactions from decades ago. Then came the hushed phone calls her father took late at night, the coded language, the sudden trips to remote locations. Liam, a former investigative journalist, had a keen eye for detail and an uncanny ability to connect disparate pieces of information. Together, they had uncovered a vast network of corruption, money laundering, and even worse, a connection to a series of disappearances in the fictional city of Silverwood, a rival industrial hub. The Beaumont Empire, built on generations of power and prestige, was a house of cards, its foundations crumbling under the weight of its own dark secrets. Amelia remembered a particular incident from her childhood. A young intern, a bright and ambitious woman named Clara, who had suddenly vanished without a trace after questioning some unusual figures in the company's accounts. Her father had dismissed it as a personal matter, but Amelia's child's intuition had always told her otherwise. Now, with adult eyes and a growing understanding of the world, Clara's disappearance felt like a chilling precursor to the revelations they were about to unleash. The weight of this knowledge was immense, a burden that had grown heavier with each passing day. Tonight, however, that burden would be shared, and then it would be lifted, albeit explosively. The guests continued to mingle, oblivious to the impending storm. Richard Beaumont, now engaged in a hearty laugh with a prominent judge, exuded an aura of untouchable power. He believed himself invincible, his secrets buried deep, his control absolute. But he had underestimated his daughter, and he had certainly underestimated the quiet determination of the man she had chosen to marry. The past, with its forgotten victims and buried truths, was about to resurface, not as a whisper, but as a deafening roar that would shake the very foundations of Veridian Heights. The wedding, meant to be a celebration of new beginnings, was poised to become the stage for a devastating end. The intricate details of their investigation had consumed their lives for months, late nights spent poring over documents, cross-referencing names, and tracing shadowy financial trails. Liam's journalistic instincts had proven invaluable, guiding Amelia through the labyrinthine world of corporate malfeasance. They had worked in absolute secrecy, knowing that a single misstep could not only jeopardize their mission but also put their lives at risk. The stakes were incredibly high, but the desire for justice, especially for Clara and countless others who might have suffered, fueled their resolve. Amelia felt a cold knot of dread and determination in her stomach. The moment of truth was approaching, and there would be no turning back. It was during one of these late-night sessions that Liam revealed his true expertise. "Amelia," he'd said, his eyes glinting with a focused intensity she hadn't seen before, "I'm not just an accountant. Before I met you, I was a lead forensic financial analyst for a top-tier investigative firm, specializing in uncovering corporate fraud and money laundering for federal agencies. I left because of ethical conflicts, but these skills, they're exactly what we need. He then proceeded to dissect a complex offshore transaction, explaining its implications with a clarity that stunned Amelia. He wasn't just competent, he was brilliant, a hidden weapon her father had completely overlooked. Together, they meticulously built their case, connecting the dots between shell corporations, political donations, and the sudden, unexplained wealth of several of Senator Beaumont's associates in Oak Haven. The evidence grew, piece by chilling piece, painting a picture of a criminal enterprise far more vast and ruthless than Amelia had ever imagined. The final, horrifying discovery was the link to Clara, the vanished intern. They found encrypted files, recovered by Liam, detailing Clara's attempts to expose the fraud, and then a final chilling communication from her just hours before her disappearance, mentioning a meeting at a secluded warehouse in Silverwood. They would never see it coming, Liam had whispered, his voice grim. And when they did, they would beg. They would try to stop us, but it would be too late. As the evening progressed, the moment Amelia and Liam had meticulously planned drew near. The speeches began, a series of saccharine platitudes from various family members and business associates, each one praising Senator Richard Beaumont's legacy and subtly disparaging Amelia's choice. Richard himself rose, a smug smile playing on his lips. He raised his glass, his voice booming across the ballroom. To my daughter, Amelia, and her unconventional choice. May she find happiness, despite her regrettable decision to marry outside our station. A Beaumont marrying an accountant. Truly, a unique path. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the crowd, fueled by the senator's thinly veiled contempt. Amelia felt a surge of cold fury, but she kept her composure, her gaze fixed on her father. This was it. Liam, with a subtle nod, signaled to a discreetly placed technician a contact from his past who owed him a favor. The grand projector, usually reserved for sentimental photo montages, flickered to life. On the massive screen behind Richard, a series of documents began to appear. Initially, they seemed innocuous, old company reports, financial statements. The guests chuckled, assuming it was a joke, a prelude to a family slideshow. But then, the images shifted. Scanned pages from the hidden ledger, detailing offshore accounts and shell corporations, flashed across the screen, followed by encrypted emails, decrypted by Liam, revealing a complex web of bribery and illicit dealings with corrupt officials in the fictional city of Oak Haven. The laughter died, the murmurs ceased. A stunned silence descended upon the ballroom, broken only by the soft click of the projector. Richard's face, initially contorted in confusion, slowly morphed into a mask of pure horror. His eyes darted to Amelia, then to Liam, a dawning realization of betrayal, not from his daughter's marriage, but from her actions. "What is this?" he roared, his voice cracking, but the images kept coming. The final images were the most damning. Security footage, grainy but clear, showing Senator Richard Beaumont himself, late at night, at a secluded warehouse in Silverwood, meeting with known figures from the criminal underworld. And then, a chilling photo of Clara, the vanished intern, her face pale and terrified, entering the same warehouse, never to be seen again. The collective gasp from the guests was deafening. Eleanor, Amelia's mother, clutched her chest, her face ashen. The prominent judge who had just been laughing with Richard now looked utterly aghast, his jaw slack. The carefully constructed facade of the Beaumont empire crumbled in an instant, replaced by a horrifying tableau of greed, corruption, and possibly murder. Richard, his face a ghastly shade of white, tried to speak, but no words came out. He lunged forward, a desperate, pathetic attempt to stop the projector, but Liam had already secured the equipment. His empire, his reputation, his very freedom were collapsing before his eyes, exposed by the very daughter he had scorned and the man he had dismissed as just an accountant, the disgrace of her marriage was nothing compared to the devastating truth now laid bare for all to see. The ballroom, once a symbol of opulence and power, had become a chamber of judgment, and Senator Richard Beaumont was on trial. His face went from smug satisfaction to utter terror in seconds. He tried to speak, but no words came out. He was trapped. He tried to stop me. He tried to silence us, but it was too late. Chaos erupted. Guests, initially frozen in shock, began to whisper, then to openly gasp, their faces a mixture of horror and disbelief. Senator Richard Beaumont, his composure utterly shattered, lunged towards the projector, a desperate attempt to stop the flow of damning evidence. But Liam, anticipating his move, had already secured the equipment, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the senator's frantic panic. Security personnel, initially confused, now moved to restrain Richard, who was bellowing threats and accusations. "This is a setup, a lie. Amelia, you will pay for this. You and your pathetic husband," he roared, his voice raw with rage and desperation, spittle flying from his lips. Amelia, however, stood tall, her gaze unwavering, meeting his furious eyes without a hint of fear. "The only one paying, father, will be you. For every life you ruined, every truth you buried, every crime you committed. This isn't a setup, it's justice." The police, who had been discreetly waiting outside, now entered the ballroom, led by Detective Miller, a stern-faced woman who had been quietly investigating the Beaumont Corporation for months, but lacked the definitive proof Amelia and Liam had just provided. The sight of the officers sent a fresh wave of panic through the remaining guests. Several prominent figures implicated in the documents began to discreetly slip away, their faces betraying their guilt. Eleanor, Amelia's mother, collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face, not for her husband, but for the shattered illusion of her life, the decades of carefully constructed lies crumbling around her. The Beaumont name, once synonymous with power and respect, was now irrevocably stained, dragged through the mud of public scandal. The wedding, meant to be a celebration, had become a public execution of a dynasty. Senator Richard Beaumont was formally arrested, his protests and threats falling on deaf ears. As he was led away in handcuffs, his eyes met Amelia's one last time. There was no love, no regret, only a burning hatred that promised future retribution. "You think this is over, Amelia? You'll regret this. You'll beg," he snarled, his voice hoarse. But Amelia felt no fear, only a profound sense of relief. The burden was lifted. The truth, however devastating, was finally free. The ballroom, once filled with laughter and music, was now a scene of utter devastation, a testament to the destructive power of secrets and the relentless pursuit of justice. The media, alerted by an anonymous tip courtesy of Liam, began to descend upon the estate, their cameras flashing, eager to capture the downfall of a titan. The story would dominate headlines for weeks, shaking the fictional city of Veridian Heights to its core. Amelia and Liam, hand in hand, watched the chaos unfold. Their marriage, deemed a disgrace by her father, had become the catalyst for his undoing, a symbol of integrity triumphing over corruption. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with legal battles and the arduous task of rebuilding, but they would face it together, their bond forged in fire and truth. The devastation Richard had been about to see was not just the exposure of his crimes, but the complete annihilation of his carefully constructed world, brought down by the very daughter he had dismissed as insignificant, and the man he had scorned as just an accountant. The flashing lights of police cruisers now painted the opulent ballroom in stark, unforgiving hues of red and blue, a stark contrast to the soft glow of the chandeliers. The air, once thick with tension, was now charged with the raw energy of a collapsing empire. Guests scrambled, some trying to distance themselves from the disgraced patriarch, others openly weeping at the sheer scale of the deception. Eleanor, Amelia's mother, remained slumped in her chair, her world having imploded around her, the carefully maintained facade of her life shattered beyond repair. Amelia felt a pang of pity for her mother, but it was quickly overshadowed by the immense weight of what they had accomplished. The truth, no matter how painful, was finally out. Richard's furious gaze as he was led away was a chilling promise of future battles, but Amelia knew she was ready. She had Liam, and she had the truth. In the days and weeks that followed, the Beaumont scandal rocked Veridian Heights. Senator Richard Beaumont's arrest led to a cascade of further investigations, uncovering a vast criminal enterprise that had operated for decades under the guise of legitimate business. Several high-profile individuals were implicated, and the city's political and economic landscape was irrevocably altered. Amelia and Liam became reluctant heroes, their stories splashed across every news outlet. While many praised their courage, others, still loyal to the old guard, viewed them with suspicion and resentment, whispering about the ungrateful daughter and the opportunistic commoner. The Beaumont estate, once a symbol of grandeur, became a crime scene, then a subject of public fascination, its secrets now fully exposed. Amelia, though relieved, carried the scars of her family's betrayal. The emotional toll was immense, but Liam was her unwavering support, her rock. They decided to leave Veridian Heights to start anew in a place where the Beaumont name held no power, no shadow. They chose a quiet coastal town, far from the bustling cities, a place where they could build a life based on honesty and genuine connection, not on inherited wealth or deceptive power. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to define. The wealth Amelia inherited from her mother, who, in a surprising turn, had left her a substantial sum independent of Richard's assets, would be used to establish a foundation dedicated to fighting corporate corruption and supporting victims of injustice. It was her way of atoning for her family's sins, of transforming a legacy of darkness into one of light. Senator Richard Beaumont, from behind bars, continued to plot, his hatred for Amelia festering. He vowed revenge, a promise that hung like a dark cloud on the horizon. Amelia knew their fight wasn't truly over. The shadow of her father's wrath would likely follow them, but she was no longer the naive daughter seeking her father's approval. She was a woman forged in fire, strong and resolute, with Liam by her side. Their marriage, once a disgrace, had proven to be their greatest strength, the catalyst for truth and justice. The devastation her father had witnessed was not just the loss of his empire, but the rise of a daughter who refused to be silenced, a daughter who chose integrity over legacy and love over control. The story of the Beaumonts would serve as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even the most powerful empires can crumble under the weight of their own deceit. And for Amelia and Liam, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one written not in the shadows of the past, but in the bright, uncertain light of a future they would build together, free from the chains of family secrets and the suffocating grip of a disgraced patriarch. Their new home, a charming cottage overlooking the ocean, offered a serene contrast to the tumultuous life they had left behind. The salty air and the rhythmic crash of waves became a soothing balm to their weary souls. They spent their days planning the foundation, meticulously crafting its mission and vision, determined to make a tangible difference. Though the threat of Richard's vengeance loomed, a distant, ominous rumble, Amelia found solace in the quiet strength of her new life, knowing that true power lay not in control or deceit, but in integrity and the unwavering bond of love. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger.